Welcome to another episode of The Brand Called You, a podcast and podcast show that brings you leadership lessons, knowledge, experience, and wisdom from thousands of successful individuals from around the world. I'm your host, Ashutosh Garg, and today I'm delighted to welcome an accomplished professional from Florida, USA, Mr. David Heacock. David, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
Uh, David is the founder and chief executive officer of Filterbuy, which is the leading direct-to-consumer indoor air quality company. So, David, let me start by asking you my first question. Tell me about your own journey in brief, and what was your inspiration to start Filterbuy?
Well, I'm from Talladega, Alabama originally, which is a very small town in the U.S. that was primarily built off the textile industry. So my grandfather and then my father was in the textile supply business, and in the 1990s, that business basically kind of got decimated because all of that got shipped overseas, and they kind of pivoted into the wood products supply
Hmm.
business. So I grew up in that kind of family business environment.
Hmm.
I ended up going to college and then getting a job at Goldman Sachs, where I ran the emerging market options trading business in my 20s. And, in 2012, my family was going through the sale of a family business of that family business. And my grandfather was in his early 90s and didn't want to see it leave. And so I ended up making the decision to buy it from family, having no idea what I was doing. And so I purchased what was called Talladega Machinery and Supply Company, which we were
Hmm.
primarily a supply house for the sawmill industry in the Southeast.
Mhm.
And, the average age of our sales force was in their 60s, and it was not an industry that I imagined being able to sustain over a long period of time. And so I started looking for something I could use the infrastructure for and create a product that I could sell direct, because it was a big direct to consumer movement at
Yeah.
the time. And so I ultimately settled between pleated air filters and remanufactured ink cartridges,
Hmm.
and I chose pleated air filters because they're so logistically challenged, and it would be basically impossible to import them because the shipping cost is so high relative
Amazing.
to the product cost. And that's the very long story short of how I got to the
What
air
an
filter
amazing
business.
story, David. I mean, from textiles to wood to now filters. Well said. And more power to you. But my next question, David, is why do you think indoor air quality has become such a critical issue today? And how are you addressing it at Filterbuy?
Yeah, that's a great question. Indoor air quality is obviously always been important because we spend so much of our time inside, right?
Mm,
So, having clean indoor air is pretty critical, but COVID is what really highlighted to people just how important that is.
mm, mm.
And, for us, we were growing. I started the business in 2012, so well before COVID, and we
Yep.
were growing into COVID, but we were kind of more of a niche business at the time because we were selling the higher MERV ratings, like the MERV 11 and MERV 13 air
Mm.
filters that you heard a lot about during COVID. We were doing that before COVID happened. Then COVID really raised awareness of the importance of indoor air quality, and so people started paying more attention, and it was a real tailwind for us and for our business.
Mm.
But going forward, our intention is to build the world's leading indoor air quality company, and the service aspect of it is very important. So, like, we
Mm.
historically have focused on filtration,
Mm.
but we have launched an HVAC service business in the U.S. that we intend to scale nationwide. And so that really allows us to do things like installing UV lights in places, and installing better ventilation and filtration systems, and things of that nature, which is how I see our company evolving.
Amazing. Well, you should seriously look at coming to India. I mean, certainly the city that I am in is currently one of the most polluted cities in the world because we have a lot of crop burning that happens at this time. So,
Right.
but moving on, can you explain the different factors that affect indoor air quality and how your products help to mitigate these?
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, the it every indoor airspace is different. So, like, it really depends on, like how much ventilation you have in your in whatever your space is, how it was designed. Is it a closed system or is it an open system? So, there's really no singular answer to
Yeah.
that question. That would be factual.
Mm.
But you really need to look at, where your air is coming in from, how it's circulating and how it's getting in and out of your system, and like what is it passing through when that is happening. And so,
Mm.
like, we really focus on the filtration part of it, because when you have a system that's designed well, that air is passing through the filtration system, you're actually able to do things that are going
Mm.
to allow it to to circulate correctly.
Amazing.
But like if you're in an small indoor space, like one of the best things you could do is really install a high quality air purifier that's in the room.
Mm.
That's one of like the tangible things that somebody at home or in a business could do. And there's been a lot of studies that suggest doing that can actually increase, say, IQ scores in young folks that are in school,
Mm.
for instance. And there's definitely a correlation there.
Amazing. And what, in your view, are some of the misconceptions consumers have about air filters and indoor air quality?
Some of the misconceptions. I think that historically people have thought purely of air filters as protecting their system rather than filtering their air. And I think
Mm.
COVID's changed that. But like if you look at least in the US, a lot of our competitors,
Mm.
they're selling very low MERV rated filters that may filter a rock kind of a thing, but which can protect your system,
Mm.
but it's not something that actually takes the particles out of the air. So,
Right.
and another kind of related thing is that in the 10 or 20 years ago, the filters that people were using that were high MERV rating would put a lot of strain on your unit because they were blocking too much airflow. And there's a misconception that like if you buy a MERV 13 filter that you're going to block too much airflow and ultimately hurt your system. But
Mm.
that's just not true in kind of modern day MERV 13 media. There's been so much innovation around that's allowed you to use those higher MERV ratings without blocking airflow and
Mm.
causing problems for your system. So those are no longer issues that people still believe exist.
Well said. But my next question is, that I had never imagined that something like what I may refer to as an industrial product can become a direct-to-consumer model. Tell me a little bit more, and how has Filterbuy managed to differentiate itself from so many of the big box retailers?
Yeah, it's a great question. So in the US, about 30% of the filtration market is residential and 70% of it is commercial. But, at least in the US, any building that has a central HVAC system, which is most
Mm.
homes, has a need for air filters. And a lot of times there are multiple units in a home, which means that there are
Yeah.
multiple air filters and it's a consumable product. So by definition, every, 2 or 3 months, those need to be changed.
Yeah.
And so, those are things that, create a decent sized market in the US. But if you walked into a retail store, on average, they only have 3 or 4 sizes in
Mm.
stock and generally probably one MERV rating. But, we manufacture 300 different sizes and in 4 different MERV ratings. So it's 1,200 kind of different SKUs,
Mm.
but then we also will make custom sizes to whatever size you need, because there are all types of weird air duct sizes that are in practice. And so that creates a big opportunity for us. So like I realized that a retail store could not stock
Correct.
all of the different sizes that are
Yeah.
needed. And that was one of the insights that led me to creating the business.
Wow. And that is probably something very unique about your brand or your company, isn't it?
It is, and like the other thing that is a little more nuanced, but is so important is, the like I said, only 30% is residential and 70% is commercial. All of our filters are commercial grade, so we can sell to both. And if somebody's searching online, you don't
Mm.
know if it's a commercial application or a residential application. Whereas the big box stores in the US primarily only take or stock filters that are residential grade and not quite as well constructed. And it's allowed us to sell to both the commercial market and the residential market. And our commercial business is actually the fastest growing segment of our business.
Amazing. Amazing.
So that's one of
Fabulous.
the changes. Yeah.
And you had mentioned a few minutes back that one of the reasons you decided to go into this was because the shipping cost from any other part of the world may be expensive. America itself is a very large country. And when I was reading about you, you seem to be manufacturing in multiple states. How do you manage quality control and consistency across so many different manufacturing units?
Well, it all starts with having a very good process to begin with. So I spent 8 years basically building the process myself just in one location in
Mm,
Alabama. And, it took us a long time to figure out how to do it well.
mm,
But then, when COVID happened and we really went through a big expansion phase, we already had the processes and systems in place that we could go and replicate in other
right.
places, which is what allowed us to do it so quickly.
Mm. And has been the role of technology in your own growth and your operations?
It's been critical for it. I mean, and I think it's really part of our competitive advantage. But we've built a custom built ERP system that essentially runs all of our warehousing. I like to say that we're really in the logistics business, not in the air filter business, because online we're manufacturing a product for $2.50 and selling it for 12. But that's not just profit, right? There's a lot of
Yeah.
logistics costs in getting that product to the end customer. And
Mm,
so, we have a distribution network of, 8 different shipping locations that we're able to ship from to get to most of the US in next day delivery.
mm,
And the only way we're able to manage that is because of technology and the custom built ERP system that we've built that allows us to manufacture what we need and get it to the right places that are close to customers to minimize that last mile delivery cost.
amazing. And what would you say sets Filterbuy's products apart from competitors?
The biggest is what I talked about earlier, which is like we make commercial grade filters,
Yeah.
but we sell them at a competitive price to what a lot of other box stores would say are retail or residential rated filters. So because we are so efficient from a logistics perspective that relative to our competitors, we're able to have a higher quality product at a
Mm,
comparable price.
mm,
And that combined with the fact that we can get to almost any home or business next day delivery. If you order by 2 o'clock, you get it next day.
yeah.
And there's no air filter company that I know of that's capable of doing that other than us.
Amazing. My next question is on the sustainability or the environmental challenges that I've heard a lot of face in some parts of the world. What steps are you taking to make your filters environmentally friendly?
Well, the biggest impact is actually the transportation and whatnot of getting that to a end customer, right? Like if you're importing it even from Mexico, which is a lot of our competitors do, then you have to
Mm,
that product to where your distribution center is.
yeah.
Then when you get to that distribution center, they have all types of packaging that case packed product within that ends up
Mm,
getting taken and thrown away, then repackaged and oftentimes sent to another distribution center, which is more freight cost that ends up getting sent to the end user. So like when we've done studies on this, and we have, the biggest impact is actually that logistics impact, because there's every time you move it, you're using gas or whatever the fossil fuel might be to move it. And in our model, we're optimized to minimize that type of impact. So that's the biggest thing. But then we use recycled beverage board and in all of our products and things of that nature that also reduce our environmental footprint.
fantastic. David, the next few questions are now for you as an entrepreneur and not about Filterbuy. And my first question is, you were telling me how you decided to buy this company from family, and then from a family-owned business, you transitioned it into a $200 million business. What are some of your challenges and learnings uh, as you built Filterbuy?
I don't think you have a long enough podcast for
Okay.
that list, unfortunately. But the biggest lesson that I've learned in the
Mm,
in the process is the importance of focus.
mm,
I really spent the first decade of my journey, focusing on depleted air filter,
mm,
and there were times where I veered off into other things because I thought maybe this is a better idea and I want to spend some time on it, and it always would end up detracting from my core focus and costing me. And I made a lot of mistakes where I was getting kind of lured into some other interesting business idea that may look related, but it's actually quite different. And those distractions were always the most costly distractions. So
Mm,
to me, picking an idea and staying focused on it over a long period of time
mm,
is the key to success.
amazing. And how have you managed to foster a culture in your company that aligns with your own vision of operational excellence and social responsibility?
It's leading by example. I have 1,000 employees, and I've done every job that I've asked any of those 1,000 people to do as we've built it, because I built it from scratch, and it's just, you kind of have to learn as you go. And I think that setting that culture where everybody knows that I understand what job they're doing and how to do it, and have done it myself,
Mm,
really allows a unique culture that I think a founder-led business is able to
mm,
have. But I mean, that's
mm.
definitely been a big part of my success with that.
Correct. And how important is customer service? Um, you know, Customer service is becoming more and more critical all over the world about, for everything. In your case, it is a consumer durable that you are selling. How important is customer service and customer feedback for you?
I mean, customers are everything. I mean, at the end of the day, they're the people that are paying you money for your service. And if you're in a consumable product like us,
Mm,
then we're relying on the fact that people are going to come back and purchase from us,
mm,
because it's expensive to acquire a customer. One thing I like to often tell people that sometimes they find hard to believe: for the first 3 years of the business, I did 100% of the customer service ourselves. So myself. So if I got an email, or if you sent an email to us in the first 3 years, it was me that was responding to it. Or if there was a phone call, it was me that was responding to it. But that is just how important customer service is, especially when you're building a business, because that's the only way that you can learn what you're doing right, what you're doing wrong, what customers actually need. And listening to that customer feedback and taking action against that customer feedback is critical if you want to build a consumer facing business, or really any business.
Great response. Great response. And what advice would you have for homeowners who want to improve their air quality beyond just using high quality filters?
The cheapest example that I always tell people to do is to install a UV light. You can
Hmm.
generally do it for a couple $100 or so, and you may have to replace the bulb every year or two. So it's not super expensive, and it's just a UV light that any air that's going through your air ducts is going to get zapped with. That's going to kind of take away anything bad that it comes in contact with. And so
Mm.
that's one of the easiest lifts, or in the cheapest lifts that an average homeowner can do. And you can probably even install it yourself. But in the US, I think for $200 you could buy one and get it installed, and it can have a big impact.
That's it. So I have time for two more questions for you. Are there any recent innovations in air filtration technology that you are excited about?
Well, the one that I've been involved with that I'm most excited about is we actually just released a new MERV 13 filter, which I believe is called an electromagnetic filter, which is kind of it's there's a lot of kind of sciencey stuff behind it that's out of the scope of the conversation, but it basically is allowing us to offer a high quality MERV 13 filter without having any difference in airflow between a MERV 8 and MERV 13, which is kind of what we alluded to earlier.
Mhm.
And we rolled that out with our partner Kimberly-Clark earlier this year, and it's one of the kind of biggest innovations that we've pushed forward with them that I've been a part of recently.
Right. And my last question to you, David, and this is for the many, many people who will listen to our conversation. You've been a very successful entrepreneur. What would you say are three lessons you would want a lot of our viewers and listeners to take away from your own journey and your own successes?
Well, the first is the importance of staying focused,
Mm,
and I've been successful because I've been focused, and my biggest mistakes have you know come from not being focused. So that would be number one.
mm,
Um, Kind of lesson number two, relates to persistence and resilience in that,
Mm.
we all have a tendency to overestimate what we can achieve in a year and
Yeah.
underestimate what we can do in a decade. And I have lived that firsthand. So, I think that we oftentimes get impatient and, remembering that things take time and you have to be commitment to that long-term journey before you start, if you're going to take the journey in the first place.
Yeah.
And so that would be lesson number two. And the third is just the importance of accountability. In that, like, we all need accountability partners, or we all have our weaknesses. And so when you spot those weaknesses, being self-aware about those weaknesses and then setting up systems to hold you accountable is extremely important. So those are
Amazing.
the three things that I would
Amazing. And on that
recommend.
note, David, and your three wonderful lessons, focus, focus, focus. That's so important. You must make sure that you have the persistence and the resilience to last the distance, so to speak. And third, you said was accountability is very critical, starting with the founder or the entrepreneur himself or herself and going right down the entire team. Thank you so much for speaking to me about your own amazing journey that led you to buy Filterbuy and then built it into such a major corporation in your particular space. I learned several new things about air filtration from you today. Thank you for all uh, your thoughts on customer experience, on direct to customer. I had no idea that something as a product like air filters could become a direct to consumer product. Thank you for speaking to me and good luck to you.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you. Thank you for listening to the Brand Called You videocast and podcast, a platform that brings you knowledge, experience, and wisdom of hundreds of successful individuals from around the world. Do visit our website www.tbcy.in to watch and listen to the stories of many more individuals. You can also follow us on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Just search for the Brand Called You.